In what specific ways has obtaining your master's degree in engineering management assisted you in your career? Anything in particular, or skills or insights that have been especially valuable?
Yeah, so at my current role, we do some better process reengineering, which it's kind of like a way for you to kind of go through risks. So as I had mentioned earlier, I was talking about the risk assessments that we had to do. We had to do presentations on supply chain and how does that affect a project overall. So I think having that knowledge has, in a way, really benefited me with working on better process reengineering things in my current role.
Combining a civil engineering degree with a master's degree will fast-track you to the ultimate level of career success. In this episode, I'll be talking with Alishia Ballard, land development engineer at the County of San Diego, and an expert in stormwater practices about the benefits of pursuing a master's degree in engineering management, and how it has helped her grow in her career. I'm your host, James Taylor, and this is the Civil Engineering Podcast. Before we get started, here's a quick word from our sponsor for today's episode, PPI.
PPI provides expert prep courses and study resources designed to help you pass the FE and PE exams the first time. PPI's live online courses include hours of lectures, problem-solving demonstrations, exam strategy sessions, office hours, and a passing guarantee. Check out PPI today at ppi2pass.com to see all the options available for FE and PE exam prep. Now let's dive into today's episode.
It's now time for our civil engineering conversation of the week with Alishia Ballard. Alishia, welcome to the Civil Engineering Podcast.
Hi. Thanks for having me, James. Or Taylor.
Absolutely. Excited. Taylor. Yep. James Taylor. Yep. You're good. Alishia, can you start by telling us a little bit about yourself and your career journey? How did you get to where you are today as a land development engineer with the County of San Diego?
Yeah, sure. I'll tell you about it. So I started my career at the City and County of San Francisco as a design trainee in the structural section under the Public Works department. And then from there, I ended up working for the City of San Diego as a project engineer, and that was dealing with underground utilities, water and wastewater, and capital improvement projects. And then it leads me to my current role as a land development engineer for the County of San Diego, dealing with private construction development projects.
So a lot of stuff with utilities and stormwater is what it sounds like you're working on.
Yes.
At this point in time.
Yeah, definitely.
That's awesome. A big part of our infrastructure in the country, a big part of our infrastructure in the County of San Diego, which is great to hear. So you have not just a bachelor's degree in civil engineering, but you also have a master's degree in engineering management. Can you talk a little bit about how you feel the combination of these two degrees has benefited your career, especially the role that you're currently in?
Yeah. So when I first got my master's degree in engineering management, I wasn't sure that it would be helpful for me in the land development industry, but it ended up being extremely helpful in the fact that it gave me the confidence to be able to lead. And then also it benefited me having both the civil engineering background, the standard civil engineering background, with the combination of the engineering management degree, because I was able to do well thought out solutions and bring progressive ideas back to my clients, colleagues, and community at large, since we are a government organization.
What do you think that was the key difference between the bachelor's degree, obviously civil engineering, a lot of people say framework, but those types of things. What was the main difference between what you learned through the bachelor's degree and what you learned through that engineering management master's degree?
Yeah, so the key difference that I noticed definitely was the fact that the engineering management degree has some industrial and systems engineering curriculum to it. So we focused a lot on risk assessments, SWOT analysis, Some other things I can think of are KPIs, so key performance indicators. And all of that is much different than the standard civil engineering degree, where it's kind of more focused on infrastructure and developing the built out environment. So it's more so like a business focus, I would say, the engineering management degree.
I love that. Yeah, because obviously you learn all your background stuff in that bachelor's degree. But I think a lot of times you come out of there and you're like, I have no idea how to run a business or how to manage. And I think we deal with that a lot where, as you go on in your career, you get thrown into project management, you get into business leadership. And if you don't have that background in those things, it kind of, I would say, doesn't set you up for the success that you need. You're kind of learning on the fly versus having that background like you did with your master's degree.
Absolutely.
What encouraged you to pursue your master's degree? Anything in particular that influenced or drove your decision?
Yeah, so when I decided I wanted to get another degree, that was something that I had in mind since I was probably in high school. But once I was out of school and starting my career, that wasn't necessarily something that was necessary. So when I was looking through everything and deciding, am I going to get a master's degree in a civil engineering discipline or construction management, or do I want to get an MBA? Those are all things that kind of came to mind. What ended up happening is I spoke to the dean of the program that I ended up getting my master's degree in. And this was prior to deciding my major and everything. So he kind of was encouraging in me deciding, okay, there's a mixture of the business elements, but still the engineering elements. And that's what I ended up deciding on.
Yeah, I was gonna say it sounds like a lot of engineers choose that master's business administration. You took the different route of going engineering management, and it sounds like it's benefited your career so far.
Yes, so far it has.
Now, is it true that you went through this master's program while you were still working full time?
Yeah, that is true. So it was definitely difficult, I will say, but I have a flexible organization that I'm working for. And so I was able to kind of get my master's degree and be supported by the team that I work with. Yeah. So that's what ended up happening.
That's awesome. Yeah. And I mean, obviously there's some flexibility in there, which is really important, but what are some other strategies or tips that helped you manage both responsibilities successfully? Obviously you want to be learning, you want to be growing, but you also have the responsibilities at work as well. So what are some of those tips for our listeners that you would be willing to share?
Yeah, so I think for me, it was to get my work done as soon as it was assigned and not procrastinate. That was a huge thing for me. And also the fact that I went to get my master's later. I didn't go straight after my undergrad. I felt like I was more mature. So being able to have the confidence to speak with your professors and set up meetings and ask about the exam and things like that. That was something that also assisted me. And we had a cohort style master's program. Okay. So we were in teams all the time. And so one of the benefits of being on a team all the time was when you're lacking in something, you could lean onto your team. And as long as you're a team player, I would get study tips, advice on what things to look at for an exam coming up and things like that, just because I had built a rapport with some of my teammates. So that was also a strategy that I used. And then so once again, like I had mentioned, telling your leads at work, hey, I'm in a master's program. I need some flexibility with certain things when I'm working through the program and trying to get things done. So can you kind of accommodate me on that? And luckily for me, being vocal and honest, I was able to kind of get some accommodation so that I could easily work through my program while working full time.
That's awesome. How many years after you graduated with your bachelor's did you start your master's degree?
I started in 2019, so it was about 4 years later.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. So I guess going back to the strategies, I guess it also probably allowed you to create some better boundaries. I'm sure
Yes.
with like, okay, I know I got to be on this. When I'm working, I'm working. When I'm doing school, I'm doing school.
Right.
When I'm home. It probably helped with that as well.
Yeah, it definitely did. And then just one of the cool things was my classes were after work hours. So like 5 p.m. or 6 p.m. classes. So that was also a huge benefit for me.
Long days, but rewarding in the end.
Yes. Yeah, definitely.
In what specific ways has obtaining your master's degree in engineering management assisted you in your career? Anything in particular, or skills or insights that have been especially valuable?
Yeah, so at my current role, we do some better process reengineering, which kind of it's kind of like a way for you to kind of go through risks. So as I had mentioned earlier, I was talking about the risk assessments that we had to do. We had to do presentations on supply chain and how does that affect a project overall. So I think having that knowledge has, in a way, really benefited me with working on better process reengineering things in my current role. And then also some of the things we did with GIS and underrepresented communities in my current role definitely was a benefit from being in my master's program, because it was more so about leadership and finding a way to engage your community. And I think having the engineering management, you're able to like navigate communicating with your team and what are we looking for and how are we going to get to kind of a solution. So
I'm gonna ask you a question here, and there's not a right or wrong answer here, but do you think engineers in general are bad communicators? Like I said, no right or wrong answer. Just asking the question.
That's a really good question. Sometimes. Because you're thinking analytically, right? So sometimes it's hard to come up with the verbiage, or it's kind of hard to like communicate what you're trying to say. You're like, hey, I just have the solution and I know how to work to the solution. So it's hard sometimes to navigate communicating properly when you're in that mindset as an engineer. But I think that's a part of interpersonal skills that can be gained.
Yeah, I know I grabbed that one out of left field, but I just want to, you're talking about communication and the GIS project, and it's something that I hear a lot of engineers, like you brought it up.
Yeah,
you said it exactly right. We're very analytical in our thought process, and to take it from being an analytical thought to being something that other people can understand and comprehend is the key piece of communication. And I would say it takes you from being a good engineer to a great engineer.
Yes, I agree.
Having that communication skills. Going back to what we were talking about and yourself and your engineering management degree and your career. Can you talk a little bit about how dynamic leadership differs from traditional leadership roles, and how have you applied these principles in your work at the county?
Yeah. So when I think of dynamic leadership, I kind of think of being a leadership from like a human lens, if I can say. So one of the things about that, it's more so than just leading someone when I think of traditional, it's more so like, okay, process and then output, process, output. But dynamic leaders, they work on their character. They work on how they can be present and listen to their team.
Yeah.
And how do you lead your team to a vision that like a shared vision? How do we all get to where we need to go as a group? And then also about being a servant leader. So dynamic leadership sometimes is a thankless job, but you know that in order to get something done or to walk toward a vision, you're incorporating everyone, listening to all the ideas and getting there in that way. So those are some of the things that I learned in my kind of like experience, not only working in the civil engineering industry, but then getting my master's degree and then just applying it within my work in general outside of, my day-to-day job. So I definitely lean more toward dynamic leadership than the traditional leadership of, hey, process, output. I work on like growing myself and working on my character, and how can I develop that so that I can be a better leader in the workplace. Yeah.
How have you applied some of these principles? So any specific examples of these dynamic leadership things that you've picked up that you've applied in your day-to-day work?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I was working with kind of like a mentee. So I was mentoring someone, a college friend's brother that was in environmental engineering. But what ended up happening is he was looking for an internship opportunity. And I'm really big on mentorship and, just trying to increase the amount of engineers in the workplace and things like that. So,
yeah.
So, I told him, we don't have any positions at the time, but, soon enough we will. So one of the things that I did during that process is I spoke with the director at my organization and human resources about how we can better, recruit and kind of like get a workplace that represents the community in which we're serving, right? And so that included looking at interview questions. What type of questions are we asking? Are we recruiting at the same schools? Because that's very common. You could get a couple people that are good from one school, and then that's where you're always recruiting instead of looking outside of that. And
right.
Those are some things that we spoke about. And I can say indirectly with those conversations, we do have a more diverse workforce in the department that I work for. And it took about 2 years to do that because they did end up changing interview questions. They did start recruiting from specific organizations to try to bring in a different workforce. And then directly going back to someone I mentored, he was able to get an internship because of me having those conversations internally and it actually turning out to be something that could assist him, and then also benefit others.
That's awesome. That's great.
Yeah.
One thing you said there was really interesting was over 2 years.
Yeah, it takes a second.
Right? Okay, so that's a great point. Is a lot of times when we try and implement these leadership changes or styles or implement things or trying to change things, we're looking for that immediate result.
Yeah.
But a lot of times it's the small steps over a period of time that leads to that drastic change. As you saw, where by getting things more diverse, it takes time.
It does. And a lot of patience. It takes patience too. You're not going to get something immediately.
Yeah, and it can get frustrating, I'm sure, of like, hey, what am I seeing anything from this? But it's great you're able to look back now and say, wow, the little things that I brought up, the little things that we worked on is making a difference now.
Yes.
So you talked about mentorship a little bit and how much that's been important to you. Can you share an example of an innovative process that you worked on through STEM, volunteerism, mentorship that made a significant impact?
Yeah, I think like kind of going back to what I talked about, working with the director and human resources, some of the things that I do outside of my daily work involve engineering organizations. So I'm part of M.S.E.M, National Society of Black Engineers. And so a lot of the STEM work that we do there is all volunteer. And then we kind of reach out to local schools. So I've assisted with recruiting for M.S.E.M at some charter schools in the area. And then also taking on huge positions within the organization to build up programs. So
what huge positions? What positions have you taken on?
So I did a professional development conference. I was a vice chair for that.
Wow.
And
okay.
That was a huge deal because I think at the time it was our largest conference, professional development conference, but it's since been kind of succeeded by some other conferences.
Bigger, yeah. Okay.
But at the time we were able to bring in a group of, I think it was a Lego STEM camp, and we were able to bring in a group of around 30 young men within the community. And so I'm happy to say I was part of that. And then we also did a GIS training at that conference. We brought in local TV personnel or radio host personalities for that. And so that was like kind of my biggest impact so far of what I was able to do with kind of the volunteering segment with STEM.
That's great.
Yeah.
You talked a little bit about NSBE, National Society of Black Engineers. Can you talk a little bit about the importance of diversity in engineering, and even looking back over the years of, from when you started to where we're at now, what you've seen change over those years?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I feel like, so over the years for me, it's really assisted me with my professional development, I will say, because, going from a high schooler to college is there's like a huge gap there. Especially for me, I wasn't really familiar with engineers when I was younger. And then so deciding as a junior in high school, hey, I'm going to become a civil engineer. My mom and dad were kind of like, what is that?
What's that? Yeah.
So,
right.
It's a huge gap. So once you get into like college, I was able to find this organization and kind of find people that were on the same track and the same journey as me and peers. So it's a huge moment of belonging, hey, do I belong? Because you may be in a class and you may not, not know anyone in the class, or often for engineers, there's one woman in the class, you got to find a commonality and make friends, and there's group projects, and it's like, oh no. But once I joined NSBE, I kind of was able to build my group and build, kind of like a network of not only mentors, but people that I was mentoring, and diversity in the workplace. As someone that has been at 3 different organizations is huge, because I think sometimes people think that diversity is just one thing, but it's multiple things. It's the way people approach problems. It's the way that they come up with solutions. And when you have people from different backgrounds and different cultures and different schools and, different lenses, basically, you as an organization only benefit because you now have a way to solve several different problems, several different ways, because you ended up investing in a diverse group instead of having people that think the same way or act on solutions the same way or come from the same areas or things like that.
Yep.
So diversity is huge for me, and I've seen it work in multiple workplaces.
I love that.
Yeah.
And, we all have our unique backgrounds and our unique experiences. We don't want clones. We need people to have their different experiences to help each other out.
I love that.
What challenges and successes have you experienced while implementing the Regional Water Quality Control Board Stormwater Low Impact Development and Best Management Practices?
Yeah, so there has been quite a few challenges with implementing that. So in California, we had the MS4 permit that came through in 2016. I started working with the County of San Diego, I want to say in 2018. So it was fairly new to a lot of engineers. And there was definitely an increase of, I want to say, engineering technique when it came to having to implement the low impact development practices and also the best management practices. So in general, I want to say we have a best management practices manual that changes every few years in the county. And one of the things that I noticed when I first started working there is they would just change the template randomly. And we're dealing with our clients, right? And a lot of engineers that maybe aren't familiar with this, they used to do stormwater a certain way, and now there's new things developing and they don't know how to necessarily do it. So one thing that I asked for, because they worked with a consultant to develop the manual, is an actual spreadsheet that actually went through each step within the template for our priority development project management plans. Sorry, I kind of got tongue twisted, but yeah.
You're good.
Those plans are basically reviewed by us internally, but they're submitted and certified by a private engineer. So in order for us to kind of have the the words and the way to explain, we needed some type of spreadsheet that it comes with the template that actually goes back and cites the sections within the design manual that we can point to. And so in asking for that, we were able to get that. And that kind of bridged the gap for that challenge, I think, because we were able to explain and point back to the manual because we were learning at the same time as our clients. And I think that was really a big thing that we did in regards to that.
Love that. Sounds like a great project to get done. And it sounds like you said, it's not just benefiting you, it's benefiting the engineers that you're working with on a day-to-day basis as well. And a lot of times we need to be thinking about the holistic approach to things, not just thinking about, where does this impact or how does this help me? How does it help everyone around me? And how do we make sure we're all getting to this common goal, which in this case is a pretty important water quality standard that needs to be implemented.
Yes, absolutely.
So our time is coming to a close here. What final piece of advice can you share with engineers who are considering a master's degree?
I would definitely share that if you are working full-time as you're pursuing your master's degree, please make sure that you have a flexible schedule. That's my biggest advice because if you are going to take on a graduate program, while working a rigid schedule, it will not benefit you. So definitely make sure, check with your supervisors or the team that you work for if they are willing to be flexible while you go into that journey.
All right, it's now time for our CE Hot Seat segment of the week with Alishia Ballard. Alishia, welcome to the CE Hot Seat. You ready to go?
Yes, I'm ready.
All right, first question. Do you have any specific rituals that you practice every day? For example, do you have a specific morning ritual, lunchtime ritual, things that you do consistently on a daily basis that contribute to you being a successful professional?
Yes, my morning ritual is I answer all my emails in the morning before I start my projects, just to make sure that I am fully ready to go when my projects come in and I do not have any emails to answer to.
I love that. What is one book that you recommend to engineers regularly, or just one book that you found to be extremely helpful in your professional and or personal development?
This one's for personal development. It's Set Boundaries, Find Peace. And it's by Nidra Glover Taweb, I think is how you pronounce her last name. And that definitely helped me because it helps you with knowing how to say no, knowing how to take care of yourself. And that helps you in your professional life too.
Thinking back on your managers of the past, picture your favorite manager or managers. What was it that made them your favorite?
When I think about a few managers, I won't name them, but their kindness, and their willingness to hear me about my goals and listen to me about where I see myself, in my career. That was one of the best things I can think of with some of the managers I worked with.
I've got one final question, and that's the critical civil engineering career elevator advice question. That's such a mouthful, but we'll go with it. If you get into an elevator with a civil engineering student and had about 30 to 40 seconds with them, what career advice would you share with them?
Yeah, so my advice is to gain as much knowledge as possible from everyone around you and put it in your toolbox. Because you're not always going to be the most experienced on each subject, but you can have enough knowledge to get by in certain subjects and know how to ask questions when you need to.
I love that. Asking questions is always one of my toughest things in school. And if I would have learned that earlier, I would have been so much better off. Well,
yes.
Alishia, thank you so much for joining me today. Where can our listeners connect with you?
Yeah, you guys can connect with me on LinkedIn, just Alishia Ballard on LinkedIn. And that's the best way to get in contact with me.
Awesome. Well, Alishia, I've really enjoyed our conversation today. Learned a lot. Thinking about doing a master's degree myself now. So
awesome.
you convinced me a little bit. We'll see if that happens. But I appreciate the time you spent today, and hopefully this made an impact out there. So I appreciate what you had to share.
Thank you so much.
Please remember you can find the show notes for this episode at civilengineeringpodcast.com. There you'll find a summary of the key points discussed in today's episode, as well as links to any of the resources, websites, or books mentioned during the episode. Until next time, I wish you the best in all your civil engineering endeavors.